Great. Well, I'll go ahead and get us started and be good stewards of our time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kristen Young, and I serve as the executive director here at LeaderShape. And I just want to welcome you to our second virtual conversation of the week. And really excited to have you all here with us as we begin to talk a little bit more about how do we build better teams. Something that I know that I'm interested in from my role at LeaderShape, and I know others are as well, and thinking about how we use CliftonStrengths to do that. So as we get started, I want to kind of give us a little bit of an orientation to this Zoom space and how we'll use our time together this afternoon. Oop, I pressed too many buttons too fast. So we will stay here in the Zoom space, and we'll ask that we know that some of you may be enjoying your lunch over this time, or not have to be on camera. That's totally fine. We'll ask that you use the chat. So one way that I'll invite you to use the chat now is to just put your name and where you're joining us from in that chat and get to know each other. We will use that chat throughout the course of our time together this afternoon to ask questions, to agree with comments, and to engage in conversation. With that as well, as we begin our space and begin our time together, I want to just offer this land acknowledgement and pause for a moment for us to really think about where we're coming from as we enter into this space, and think about and honor the Native and Indigenous people from the lands that you all are joining from, and really take the opportunity to give thought then to the ancestry of the generations and people who came before us to allow us to be in this space, both in this virtual space and in the space that you occupy as you're watching this afternoon. For those of you who may be new to LeaderShape, LeaderShape is a not-for-profit organization that has a mission and vision that are stated for you here. We are committed to creating a more just, caring, and thriving world where all lead with integrity and a healthy disregard for the impossible. And we believe that when we do that, the world will be transformed, and that we don't yet live in that world. And so every time we gather together, whether it be in virtual settings like this or in in-person spaces, we're thinking about how are the topics that we're talking about, how are the things we're learning about working to create that world that we live in. And we use this definition of leadership to kind of guide our work, and to guide those spaces. And we'll use this definition as we engage in conversation today. We really do believe that leadership is a practice of co-creating a more just, caring, thriving world through living uniquely with integrity. And you'll hear us talk about this a little bit here with our friend Kyle in a while about how we do that through our strengths, how we do that through supervision and the relationships that we build. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to invite Kyle to come on and join us. And Kyle's going to engage in conversation with us today about how do we build those better teams. Kyle's connected to LeaderShape through his role as a facilitator. And Kyle, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more and tell folks about yourself and enjoying our conversation together.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kristen. I am really excited to get to be here and sharing space with you all today, talking about one of my favorite things, talking about strengths, as well as about how we use this to really intentionally build better teams. So, like Kristen said, my name is Kyle. My pronouns are he, him, and my top 5 strengths are futuristic, strategic, relator, adaptability, and connectedness. So, really, the way that I contextualize my strengths is I'm a forward-thinking individual who seeks to do this with others in community. So really, we have a co-created vision for the future. So today with our time, obviously we're in like a Zoom webinar space. We're not doing any breakout rooms today. You don't have to have your video on, but the thing that I am going to ask and invite throughout our presentation is for you to share things in the chat. So this I would love to see that and use that as a way to get a feed and feel on where people are. If that's something that you feel like you can agree to, feel free to put like in I got you, or sure, yep, whatever kind of affirmative, yes, I can do this and we'll engage in this way so that I know we are on the same page. Yay, okay, a smiley face. So Roger that. Oh yeah, here we go. So one of those things that I think is really important for us to start with is I want you to I told you we're doing chat today. So I want you to put in the chat, type it out 3 times in a row. I lead with my strengths. I lead with my strengths. I lead with my strengths. Um, I think this is such an important element to begin with, because really today what we're doing is we're stepping into that strengths mindset of how do I lead with my strengths? How do I allow my team to lead with my strengths and the individuals that I support? This is a way that we're going to really tap into what people are doing best. Usually I have people write this, but today we're on Zoom, so let's type this and have this as a reminder, a mantra that we are using. So before we jump into all of the content, I always love to give a little frame of like who I am and what it is that I do. So I am a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach, meaning that a little over 3 years ago, I worked with Gallup to get this certification. I'd been using it as a personally for over a decade and had been using it with organizations within higher education for about 3 years before I even got my certification. So it's something that I've loved doing and really engaging with. I am a TEDx speaker. Last fall, I did a TEDx around pizza plus farm equals community, talking about how my house pizza farm is a way that we are seeking to build community while also tapping into our strengths. I am a chicken tender, meaning I have 7 chickens at my house. This picture is actually a chicken of a neighbor's that wandered over to our house, and she's just the cutest little fluffy cheek chicken that you ever seen. I never thought that I would be a chicken person until like I married my husband, and here we are. I am a Pokemon appreciator. Last summer, I went to Pokemon Go Fest. I took a picture in front of a giant Snorlax, and like dream come true. And then I am a dog dad for to a little fur baby Bub. You can see him with my pizza. In the chat, I'd love it if you could just share like what your favorite food is. I always love that as a quick way to get to know folks and hear like who are we in the room. I can also like drool over and get some ideas for what I'm going to be eating. Kava. I'm not familiar with kava, and I'm going to be Googling that later. Pie. Hallelujah. So today, keep putting those like foods in the chat. Today, we've got 3 overarching topics that we're going to explore together. We're going to talk about 3 types of teams. We're going to talk about engaged and productive teams, and then about how you can foster successful partnerships as a way to like build better teams and help folks stay engaged. Dark chocolate and filet mignon. Yes. Cheeseburger soup. I feel like it's been ages since I've had that. And coconut crab soup. I've never had that, but like I love these ideas, and hopefully maybe you have some inspiration of what you're gonna have for a meal later this week.
I didn't know we were going to be so hungry and have to plan our lunch after this,
I
Kyle.
mean, I know. I was like, I'm in Pacific time, so like 10 o'clock. I have lunch coming up, so like I got that safety. I have leftover pizza. I live on pizza farm, so like not too surprising here. What I would love to do to kind of like get some like thoughts and juices flowing is I would love to hear what we think makes a great team. So if folks have ever done annotation, this is an opportunity for you to write on my screen. So what you'll do is at the like wherever you see like the little Zoom bar, there's those little like 3 dots that allow you to say view options. And then because and then you should be able to click annotate and then select text. We'll see how folks do with actually doing this. Yes. And I'm gonna so like put down what makes a great team. We've got communication. There you are. And I'm gonna there's a way for me to hide people's names, but I forgot how to do that. So, wait, hide names. There we go. Great. I know. I was like, I can see a couple of people have our little pencil dots. So, like in the little annotate bar, there should be an option for you to click text and then you can type it on there. If you're like, Kyle, I don't want to learn how to like do annotate, like put it in the chat is another great option. This is just another fun way to like get folks to like engage and like have that tactile option while we're still on Zoom. So, trust, transparency, openness to listening. Yes. If things go on top of each other, don't worry, I'll move them around so that we can read them all. Transparency, we have goals, compassion, And if we do scribble, I'll take care of that. Oh, except I can't actually take care of that. I always forget how that works. Yes, be there. I love these all rolling in. Be there for each other. Honesty, humbleness, a shared language. As a strengths person, obviously, I love a shared language. Diverse strengths. Let's see, I'll wait for another like 30 seconds in case there are other ideas that are coming in. Um, in this quick moment, I'll share like what Pizza Farm is. Pizza Farm is the place where I live. We make everything we need to make and eat pizza. Vegetarian pizza. We don't grow the wheat, we don't grow the cheese, but still the rest, like we make our own sauce and everything. Diverse viewpoints I see popped up. I think be there for each other was a new one. Everyone is heard. There's commitment and investment. Yes, my people, you know, all these different things that it takes to make a great team. I'm gonna save this and then I think I hit the X and everything. We're gonna remember how to clear the annotate. And why don't I remember how you actually work, my friend? Clear. Here we go. Clear all drawings. Okay. So, I mean, like we can see there are a lot of different things that it takes to make a great team. And these elements, I think this brainstorming process helps us to really get an idea and get into this step of like intentionally crafting, not just going by default of like what other people say, the way that things have always been done. We create and craft these teams by having intention. So today we are talking about those like three, we're using these three teams as a grounding place for what it takes to build better teams. Where's my little, okay, there we go. So the three teams we'll talk about are dependent teams, independent teams, interdependent teams. So no complex names here. These are things that we'll likely pretty easily understand and put into practice. So with a dependent team, the way that we think about these are a collection of individuals who have their roles. We all have our jobs. We know exactly what we're doing. We are closely supervised, so the manager is in charge. This doesn't necessarily mean that they're a micromanager, but it means that the manager is directing everything that is happening. The team is dependent on the manager and them giving that direction, that clarity of where we are going. So we all are like, we're a bit of like the cogs in the machine that are working and doing exactly as we are supposed to do. I'd love to hear, like, for folks, like, how many of us have been on a team that has like this? Put a 1 in the chat. Like, does it sound familiar? Have you had a job that's like this before? Whether it's in higher ed or beyond or before that. Yeah. So, I mean, like, we're familiar with what this team looks like and feels like. So we move on to our independent teams. So our independent teams are pretty similar. There's still a collection of individuals who have their roles, but the key difference is that team members work on their own tasks with general direction from their manager. So it doesn't mean that the manager needs to tell you everything that you do, but there is still that general clear direction of like you are getting direction and you are doing what you do. So you have more autonomy and there's more trust that's built into this process. So again, like how many people have been a part of this? Put a 2 in the chat. Is this a team that you've been a part of in the past that sounds familiar? And have you experienced that? Got a couple more people here familiar with this process. So then we talk about that interdependent team. What does that look like? So in an interdependent team, the key difference is that members of this team really rely on each other to get their work done. So there is that community, that co-created process to make this actually happen. The goal within this interdependent team is that we are positioning team members so that they can do what they do best. So it doesn't mean that I have my one place that I sit in, this is my one role, and this is the only thing that I do. Instead, we're figuring out what are the ways that we are going to let Kristen like do her best work? How are we going to let Abby really thrive and step into this moment? What we're doing is we're focusing on people's strengths, and instead of always figuring out how do we work with our weaknesses, improve our weaknesses. We are managing our weaknesses. With this, what we're doing is we're making a strengths-based team. It's a group of imperfect but talented contributors who are valued for their strengths and who need one another to realize their individual and team excellence. So I'm curious, like, how many of us feel like we've been on a team like this, or we're saying like, yes, this is what I want to leave? Put a 3 in the chat. How many of us have been part of that interdependent, or like that interdependent team? 3 with an exclamation. Here we are. So, I mean, like, you're like, this is cute, Kyle. This is nice. We have like 3 definitions of teams. Like, so what? What's next? So I think some important things are to know, like, even more, like, we hear this interdependent, we hear this opportunity for an engaged team, but what does it actually take to have an interdependent team? People who are relying on each other. So there are these 3 elements that I like to share for like what an interdependent team does. They share a common mission or purpose. So that was one of those things that we wrote before about what do great teams do. They have a clear mission and purpose. We know that when organizations and individuals have a clearly identified mission that we are working towards as a team, we are more engaged in this process and we are excited for our work because we know why we're doing our work. We understand that everyone on the team understands that they are appreciated and that they are great at some things and they're not great at other things. That may sound a little bit awkward because what we're saying is it's just like, yeah, like Kyle, like you're not good at, like, one of the things that I'm not always good at is like I don't have a lot of stamina. I'm not an achiever. To-do lists are not my forte. I have my own special type of to-do list, but I never refer to it as a to-do list. But what it's important is that we know it's not just about the things that you suck at. It's about also knowing those things that you are good at and that you can excel in. So and it's not about just the individual, it's about the team recognizing this. That's why there's that team members are aware of each other's strengths. So we know how Kristen leads, we know how Kelsey is leading, and we're figuring out how are we actually going to do this? Because when we know our strengths, when we know what each other person does, we can be engaged and productive in our work. So I think that there are some important beliefs to share. So like beliefs to me really are a foundational element of how we actually are going to be showing up and leading these teams. So we have our elements, but if we don't believe this, if we don't identify this, this is the way that we are going to really make this actually work. So we're developing successful partnerships when we hold these beliefs. So some things like this is something that like similar with that I lead with strengths. These are some of those like mantras that you can use to lead, remind yourself at the beginning of the day, start a staff meeting with, and recognize as a way to continue to build this foundation. So one is that we complement each other's strengths. So it's talking about how do we actually fit together and have this unique union that allows us to be successful. We need each other to get the job done. So we talked about like diversity and diversity of strengths. Like with this, that part of why we do strengths is we recognize how we need each other to be successful. Even folks who have the same top strengths, they still lead with that strength in different ways. So I think that it's important to know that like really we do need each other to get this done. And finally, like, so my partner, the person that you're working with, not necessarily your life partner, my partner does things much better than I do, and I do some things much better than my partner does. This is a really key thing, is recognizing there's a bit of humility that's going in here. There's that humbleness and recognizing that it's like, and I think also what we're doing with this is we're rewriting perfectionism so that it's not laying control over us, and instead we can be freed from those shackles. So really it's knowing that there are some roles that somebody else is going to do, and there are some things that I'm going to be asked to do because it's aligned with what I do best. So one of those ways that I think that we can really put this into practice, like I think it's good to hear what these successful partnership examples can sound like. These are super generic. And even like I would encourage, like if you start thinking, think of examples of like a successful partnership and how you do it. So one example can be like my creativity combined with his attention to detail allowed us to see success. So recognizing that these are two different ways that we lead, and when combined, we're able to like narrow in and focus and come up with these innovative ideas. She was a great sounding board and helped focus my ideas. So I'm partnering with somebody, like this is actually me, like I'm partnering with somebody that can help focus my ideas because I have a lot of things. I'm a verbal processor and I need people to hear me, talk with me. Otherwise, I'm just somebody that's like shooting ideas left and right and they're just getting lost into the ether. So I need a partner to be successful in this way. I knew how to make things happen and they kept me motivated. So again, like actually this is another example of me is like I do know how to make things happen, but I'm not always able to stay motivated. And that's where like even thinking of like my partner, my husband, he is an achiever. He's somebody who is motivated to get stuff done. I love to start a project. I don't always love to end a project, but that's why we partner to find those people who can help us in these areas. Finally, like this overarching idea of we each contributed something that the other person lacked. So it's not just about like you aren't enough. It's recognizing how each of us fill the gaps and fill those places. So one of the other ways that I kind of think about this interdependent team with these successful partnerships is like a puzzle. So like in puzzles, like they are like, I mean, the like dependent team, we are all just squares that like sit next to each other, or like even like they're just like squished in a place. The independent team, like we have independent squares that are sitting apart from each other, but then you get to the interdependent team, and that's where we're recognized for the whole humans that we are, where we have puzzle pieces. There are chunks that are missing from us, so those things that we don't do as well, and then there are chunks that go outside of us. Those are our strengths, those places that we excel. And when we partner with each other, we are able to like fill in those gaps and feel whole, as we are not seen just for this gap that we have. Instead, we have somebody that's able to support us in this area, and we are still able to excel in this other place. So really with this, like obviously to no surprise, like the thing that I say is like the fastest route to building your successful partnership is knowing what each person's strengths are. So I want to like next slide is like my last slide, and we'll have some time for Q&A. But these are some easy things that you can do as a leader. Some like mostly pretty low cost things that you can do as a leader, as a manager of teams, and put into practice. So one, have your team take the CliftonStrengths assessment. So you can either pay $20 for it, or you can pay $20 for almost any Gallup book. Like here, like one of my favorites is Wellbeing at Work. So great, like development opportunity is like in the back. It always comes with a little code here. Like here, it's a little green one for Wellbeing at Work. I paid $20 for this. The assessment itself costs $20. So basically you get a like free assessment with this. It's a twofer. When you have your team take their strengths assessment, have them, it starts simply by sharing what your strengths are. So here, like today, like on Zoom, if you like make my little picture big, you can see that I have my top 5 strengths listed on here. I'm using an app called Warmly that's connected to my Zoom. And you can even have, if you're in virtual world, connect your strengths that way, but have people share their strengths. And the thing that I think is really critical with this is that you have people share their strengths and also create their own definitions of like, what does it mean for you? Like I gave my introduction of like my top 5 strengths and how I live into those strengths. That's not written in the like textbook definition of like futuristic. That's not written in the textbook definition of relator. This is my definition. And so like I talk about it. I value prop myself when on teams to figure out like, hey, this is what I would love to do and how I would love to engage in this process. So there are a lot of things that come really just from sharing, because then it makes it easier for your team to then recognize others, see their strengths that that person is bringing to a team, and you have that continued moment of like, you see people for like what they do best. You find ways to partner with people, because when I hear somebody is good at like managing a project and seeing it through, I'm just like, hey buddy, let's partner up and buddy and figure this out and how to work together, how we can make this a mutual project. So I think like finding ways that we can recognize, whether that is at a staff meeting, you have like a good old mug that you pass around of who had a strengths moment, what you saw in somebody else. You've got a snaps jar. There's so many great options. Higher ed folks, like we know, like there's so many ways that you can do this. The last thing that I'll share, like as a strengths coach, is hire a professional to like facilitate your training. This is one that actually costs like money, but it's a great way that you can even like continue to offload that from like your responsibilities and bring in opportunity there. But really, these foundational elements start by having a conversation about what our strengths are, seeing what each person does so that people can be set up for opportunities that are best for them and can be successful in their work and feel engaged and excited for what's happening in life. So the last question and last thought that like we'll kick off our Q&A with is like, I'm curious to know what you want to learn more about when it comes to like whether that is like building teams, using strengths as a process. If it's even a question about your own strengths, we got time. If you're willing to like come off mute, share questions, like I'm happy to explore that and have a conversation today. But yeah, I'll stop sharing screen and would love to hear like, what do you want to know more about? What are you curious about after this?
Thanks, Kyle, for putting all that information together while people are kind of thinking about their questions. I just really appreciated your the way you talked about how it's important for people to describe what their strengths are, right? And how do we make sure that when we're talking about them, you understand that if we were to share a strength, which we don't share any strengths in the top 5, but if we did, I'm on the achiever side, so I think we're oh no, that's maybe connectedness. I think we share connectedness if I'm looking at
Oh yeah,
your piece
uh-huh.
there. So yes, but connectedness to me might mean something different to you, and how that I think it's really important to talk about how that shows up in our daily work, or in whatever team environment you're a part of, because connectedness to me might show up in a different way than it does to you. And so, how are we having that important conversation about what that looks like outside of what the book tells us it looks like?
Yeah. No, because I think that like especially like I mean there's probably plenty of folks here that like know a lot about strengths, but like I think of strengths as like it's a when you first meet somebody, it gives me an idea of who you are, but ultimately it's up to you to tell me like what's that actually mean for you? How are you living into that? And how am I gonna like as a manager, as a like, and for me, like I'm a coach, like as a coach, like how am I gonna help you live into that and use it to like creatively get your work done? Because like I still need to like get a to-do list done. I just don't have my to-do list set up in like the traditional like way that like Kristen's to-do lists probably look drastically differently than mine. Mine are all in my calendar. Like I put
Mm.
things in appointments and that is my to-do list. And that's the way that I keep track of that stuff. And I know I have to get it done then and need to know, I'd like, yeah, explore then.
Right. Well, and I think it's really important to share that too, because then I can appreciate that my to-do list definitely does not fit in my calendar. So it is the traditional on a piece of paper. I could show it to you right now, to-do list. But it appreciates that I see your working style, right? And I think about when you're talking about building a team, how do I understand and respect that your working style is going to be different than my working style, and different doesn't mean better or worse. It is just what works for you. And on the flip side, I think as a manager and as a leader, how do I help people figure that out for themselves or give them tools to try along the way, right? Because very often, and I think I've worked with colleagues and also supervised folks who might look at my style of a to-do list and be like, yeah, that's overwhelming to me. I don't, it's like you've written in a foreign language and I don't understand it. And so how do I, as a manager and as a leader, show people other options and give people, different ways that they can excel and not feel, that deficit mindset that goes into the way teams form.
Yeah, because I mean, I think especially as a manager, like I mean, I always think back to like one of my last managers that I had, like she was really excited to get into strengths. And because I was into strengths and I was like, yes, awesome, I'm going to feel seen. And then what she turned around and did is she was like, you're not doing the things the way that I do them. I don't understand what you're doing. Do things differently. Like, and she's like, here's my strengths, live into that. And that led to me like leaving the job before I had another job lined up
Right.
because I was like, nope, can't do that. So, I mean, finding ways to help folks, like, it starts with your own journey of strengths and then continues into like thinking about like your learning process that you went through and how can we help that other person do that and what can you learn, that curiosity.
Yeah. Well, I think along those lines, Brenda mentioned here in her comments that she didn't have any questions, but it really helps her think about re-engaging and revisiting strengths. Kyle, do you recommend as a strengths coach, like how often should you revisit those things? It was a conversation or question I had as I started to
Yeah.
get ready for our time together today. I was like, should we revisit those yearly? Like what if it's not obviously we want to make it part of our culture, but when should we revisit them?
Yeah, I mean, I often think of it, I mean, so I've been a part of a couple of different like performance review processes, like where you do like your annual performance review, and like that's a nice time, like when you do it just once a year. I'm now part of a organization that does a quarterly like performance review, and it's it's a little bit intense, like doing it every 3 months. It's like you finish one, and then like 1 month, by the time you finish going through the whole process, you're like, I'm doing this again. But I mean, so when I was new to strengths, I did it on a monthly basis, and I would only start with one strength at a time and just be like, this month, futuristic, next month, strategic. And I would just go one by one. This is when I was like really new to like actually like putting it into practice and changing my work style. Once you become like comfortable with your strengths, I think like I'm a New Year's resolution kind of person. So like New Year's resolutions is always a time that I come in, like I'm reevaluating and reconnecting with like, what's my life purpose? Where do I want to be? But I think really in the end, the way that I feel like could meet a happy medium is anytime you approach a new project, you have
Mhm.
a new initiative that's going to be done in like 6 months to 5 years. You start by with that project of evaluating your strengths. What is my role? How am I going to play into this? And also knowing like, what do other people do best and who am I going to be partnering with to make this happen? Some folks will also ask the question of like, with that revisiting, like how often should I retake the assessment? The only times that I'm a fan of retaking the assessment is when you look at them and maybe like 3 out of 5 no longer resonate with you.
Mhm.
Even if it is like just 1 out of 5, you're like, I don't know about that one. Like it's likely still there. It just maybe feel a little bit different. And the thing that I encourage if you have like the financial ability is to like get your full 34, which does cost more money, but I think the full 34 is going to provide greater insight than retaking the assessment. Retaking it may just, yep, here we go. Brenda, I recently made a chart with the 6 times I've taken strengths from 2004 to 2022. 4 of my top 5 have been the exact same for all 6 times. And for folks when it isn't the same exact top 4, likely your top 10 are still like within like pretty like close to each other. So like, and that's where like that full 34, that's why Gallup started doing the full 34, is because they were seeing those folks and seeing there is that consistency for folks.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Let's see, there were some
Um,
questions in there. Did you see them?
yeah. Yeah, I think so. The team grid, or like, do you have a favorite activity for exploring a team grid and engaging in this discussion about different interpretations of strengths with an organizational team? Are we talking like a directors like kind of team, or like a team that you manage is like one thing that I'm curious about. But I think some things that come to mind is so one is like an activity called like the best of you. I think that you can search that activity and like find it through Gallup. But what we're talking about is we're talking about like when this is an opportunity for individuals to share like when will you get the best of me? Like when it comes to like, as a manager, you'll get the best of me when you supervise me in this way, when you provide me with these opportunities. And I think that that's a fun activity where you get people to share their voice in different ways about how their strengths allow them to be successful. And it's great for managers to hear that. When we're talking like broader, like thinking like a director's team or like a dean team, deans and directors. So I think one thing that I would think of is some people will recognize like they'll see gaps in those like team grids. Like team grids are a place that I really recommend like having somebody like outside of your organization to talk with you, because we can create some complexes around that of like where like, I mean, that's an easy place to fall into the strengths or like the weaknesses fallacy and just get stuck on that. But I think it's recognizing what are the unique ways that you all lead that when there are trends of like thinking in higher ed. We have a lot of folks who do relationship building really well, and understanding like what is the diversity within our relationship building and how do we still like meet the needs that we have.
That makes sense. There's a couple of questions here, Kyle, about that interdependent to or independent teams to interdependent teams or interdependent teams. Like, how do we encourage that? What steps can we be taking? I see Celine has a question like that, and then yeah, a couple of questions like that of how do we encourage that, especially, and it looks like Celine, and jump in there if I'm getting this correct, right? Especially among students, but I think the same is true for professionals as well.
Yeah, I know. I mean, even thinking from a like student lens, it's like there's so much that starts from that like definition process. And I think that's also like the easiest thing that y'all can do. Like, you don't need to be a strengths coach to help people like define what their strengths are. Like, I'm just gonna like flat out say that, like, you don't need me for that process. But like what you're doing is you're like helping people like figure out like what does this actually mean for you. And one of the great ways that you can exemplify and start this is like by you having this conversation and you showing people like this is how I've defined it and this is how I put it into practice. When it comes to leading teams, especially with individuals, like one of my favorite practices and things that I'm working with others to do is like when you're in a team meeting is articulating, I would like to volunteer for this because I lead with futuristic. Like I want to be a part of this project because I see my strength being allowing me to be able to do this. So like you're getting ways that you are articulating. It starts first by like helping others see like what is your strength and what do you do? And then as you like as it becomes more of a common language, then others will start to recognize it in you. Like even like I think about, so like my 9 to 5, I work for an organization called Inside Track. We do academic coaching and we do like coaching to help others like be coaches too. But what has happened like over the past years is like I started branding myself as like the strengths person. And like when we're in team meetings, and I will start with like, okay, like I'm a strengths person, so I'm going to say the answer is strengths, but like here's why, or like here's how I can help you as a strengths person. So you have these like I help statements for yourself and you're continuing to position yourself. Now like it's been close to 3 years, like I don't have to say anymore that I'm a strengths person. People know that. They are actually the ones who are saying it for me. And so, like, you're creating this professional brand for yourself. People know who you are, they know what you do best, and you're known for this. And so, like, you can create opportunities for your team to also do this. And I think that that's a great way to start the process to move from that, like, independent teams to an interdependent team, because your team is recognizing what each person does well. And like I think the key is also making sure that it doesn't end just with you like value popping your strength. You're encouraging others, you're identifying it in your team, and you're saying like this is why you do this really well. Like I've started to do like debriefs for coaches, and I have them start with like what are your top 5, and like they'll be talking about like the things that they do, and I'm like, oh yeah, like that's relator showing up there, like this is part of what this is. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're right, Kyle, that is what this is. And so that's a great way that we get some of those like ideas, helping others to identify it for themselves and starting with identifying for you too.
I think that's a great point, and we'll see if Celine has other questions in the follow-up too, but it makes me think too, then as I'm looking at, maybe a capstone project, like Celine mentioned there, when I'm guiding
Mm,
students or guiding the group that I'm working with, there indefinitely will be things that I cannot accomplish individually in that project to the best of my ability to make it what I want it to be. And how are we then open to that conversation of, yep, so I know the strengths of my team. I know other people. Can someone else contribute in this area? Because I don't know how to do this. I don't do it well, and I think you do it better. So how do we, provide people language to put that invitation out there? And I think that could start as an advisor, could start as a leader of the group too, when we're organizing the project and looking ahead, like you mentioned, when we come up with a new project and saying, this needs to happen, but I don't know how to do it. Does anyone have that skill? Right. And I can think of many times in my previous roles on a college campus of how I might role model that for students, of not being the expert in the room and really allowing their expertise to shine through those processes that then they emulate and replicate in the other areas.
yeah. And I love that example too, because I think it can also like some of this work can start by like teaching about a growth mindset. Like, how do we embrace that as a team? How do we do that and recognize there is that like vulnerability aspect of like, I can't do this yet, or I'm not sure how this works. So, like, we are vulnerable, we are sharing what's happening. And by embracing that growth mindset, I think is a really great opportunity for folks. Yes, I love group coaching as like an element. Like, I mean, a lot of what I do with folks around top five is like it is a group coaching project because there's so much that you learn by like having people share in a group what their strengths mean. Like, even when I hear other people talk about, I'm trying to think of what it was. So they were talking about relator, and their relator was heavily grounded in like encouraging others people to do work and helping hold them accountable to get stuff done. And I was like, but wait, isn't that achiever? Like, and in that realm, like I learned about like relator can mean a lot of different things. Like, we all ground ourselves in different areas and ways that we can like support folks. Um, so yeah, I think that there's so many cool ways that we can define and redefine what's happening.
Well, is there a resource that you recommend? Like if someone's new to strengths and they want to kind of learn about all the different strengths, is there a specific book that you're like, try this one first? Or because it makes me think, what you're saying. I know my 5 top strengths and I look at those, but I don't know that I've read in a while what the strengths of others are and where to engage in that with
Yeah.
this bookshelf
I
thing.
just love that Kyle is like, let me get up and go to my bookshelf and
Yeah.
find some
He's like, it's
Yeah.
right here. Let me get you that.
I know. So there are two that I really love. I mean, so like obviously like well-being in the workplace. This is one that like sits on my desk like all the time. So like well-being in the workplace is a great one. Like if you want to take that holistic well-being approach. If you're looking for a start, like I mean, this book, like I mean, also it's been a little while since I've read it, but strengths-based leadership
Mhm.
is the one that I started with. They've got a lot of great team information as well as they have like a snippet for every single one of your strengths. One of the things that I like about Gallup, so like I'm a we've already established, I am not an achiever. I'm not always the person that like sees things through. So what I love about some of these books is that about half of it is like the actual book to read, and then the other half is like the glossary about all of the strengths. So I love that as a option. The other book that I really love is The Power of Two, because we're talking about partnerships and how we're doing that. Um, I do love Theme Thursday. Theme Thursday is a good option. I do have a podcast. It's a little bit more centered on like business owners. So people are in the entrepreneurial world, but like we go through like one strength at a time and like talk about what that means for folks, how it actually shows up in their lives and can help them be successful. To be a strengths coach, you have to pay money, and then you go through a week-long training, as well as they help or like they have you do some um sample coaching, and then you like take an assessment. But for like if you work in a nonprofit world, at least a few years ago, I think it was like $5,000 to do. I did mine virtually at the beginning of the pandemic. But they do a lot of in-person opportunities too. Let's see. And my podcast is called Love Your Strengths, Love, Your Strengths. It's meant to be like, oh, thanks, Abby. A love letter to and from your strengths. Because I think like that's really in essence what I do with strengths is like we are loving what it actually means to live into our strengths and how even like our strengths have worked with us to like help us love ourselves. So like the first episode, like I talk about woo and how I did not love it at first. And then I learned to love it and how it continues to love me, even as it's like no longer in my like top 5 anymore, but I still claim it as a strength and it's still like very much who I am.
I love that woo is one of the most, I feel like it's one of the most talked about strengths. I feel like whether you have it or not, like it is one of, I wish there was, maybe there's a study about it, like, but I feel like woo is one that
It's
always
the one
gets,
that, because like woos are always going to talk about like their strength of woo. Like here we
like,
go,
I knew
woo,
that that was going to
yeah.
blow up in the chat. I knew all the woo people would also comment there. I get it.
Yeah, I know. I was like, and as a college student, like was like people had their ideas of like what woo meant, who you are, what that meant, your values were, and that was part of the part of the process of I was just like, that is not me, that's not who I am, and like realize that like self-authorship process of owning who I am and recognizing that like woo doesn't have to mean like I am not a woo girl, like but I am gonna still just be excited and energetic and wanting to like be your best friend and figure out like how do I make you feel included and loved in this moment.
I love it. Although woo Abby and woo adjacent, don't be afraid of non-woos being afraid of people who have woo. It's okay. It's all are welcome in the strengths world, I believe.
Were there any questions that I missed or other thoughts that we had?
I just wanted to say, and not just because of the woo that just came up, I love the way that strengths finders and things like this, that there's not a good or bad strength, that it's just the identification of what those strengths are. I think it lines up with Brene Brown's clear as kind, right? When we're clear on what those strengths are, we can jump into what those opportunities are a lot more clearly because we know where our strengths lie. We know who we can partner with because of that information. I think that's so valuable.
Yeah. No, I think like, and it's always about, like you said, like strengths is an identifier. It's not a like label. It's up to the individual. It's about how you do your work and how you show up. And like really, it's the way that we're creating excellence. We're creating ease for the individual. And it's like, how's this going to work for you? So I think there's a lot of great stuff with that.
I think in all of it, right? All the things that you're talking about, Kyle, is knowing when you are working as a part of a team and everyone is contributing their best, you are building that better team, right? Like that is the work that you're doing to make that team better. And very often, I think sometimes we get checked down to like our team has to do these 7 things, but what you're saying here, and I think a great reminder is that the first and most important piece is how are you understanding each other, and strengths is one of the pieces to be exploring through those relationships that you're building. There's lots of others, but strengths especially is one of those.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thanks, Kristen.
You're welcome. But I don't see any other questions unless anyone has anything. Oh yeah, Brenda, a great way to stay aware of yourself. Yeah, absolutely. I do. I've appreciated the conversation today, Kyle, just to think about it from my own lens. It has been a hot minute since I've dusted off my strengths and thought about what they are. So I don't have a chart. Like, is it Brenda that had a chart? I need to go back and see if they would be the same.
One of the last things I'll share, like just, I mean, like clear invitation, like connect with me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the place that I like to hang out. You'll see me share about like podcast episodes, random things. Like in my day job, I'm a career coach, and like so I always share like things about like this application for people who are like in search of like their role, what they do. Well-being at work is like one of my favorite things to talk about. So if your organization like is looking to like work and integrate like a well-being model practice into what's happening, or I know there's always a well-being budget, like Think About Me is a fun way that a lot of folks like in higher education already know about strengths. And it's a great way that we can like really emphasize this natural way that we do work and use that to find the things that we need to do. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Happy to continue this conversation. Even if y'all want to like meet one-on-one, happy to quick put a little like coffee chat thing on the calendar.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, Kyle. I want to just, offer our appreciation for taking the time to gather us today and to talk about this. I think it is a great time, and especially right for many of us in higher education, we've just finished what is a very busy time of the year and are looking ahead to where are the projects looking in the future. And this might be a great opportunity to just reconnect with our staffs and the teams that we work and be a part of to talk about this and to let everyone be seen in this space and how do you build moving forward. So thank you for the conversation and for the tools that you provided. It was really, really, really helpful. As we wrap up, I have some important announcements in true LeaderShape fashion. I have some things to share with you all. We will be gathering again tomorrow for another conversation at the same time. Tomorrow's conversation, as I pull up its title, that's today. Oh no, that's tomorrow. We are going to be talking about 5 powerful improv exercises to strengthen team psychology and safety. So again, building on this, how do we care for the teams that we're a part of? Thinking about how we use improv, which I'm super excited to learn more about. So join us back here. Different link, but you can find it on all of our social media channels to join us there tomorrow. Again, if you are thinking about if LeaderShape is new to you and you enjoyed this conversation and want to partner with us to provide other programming for your students or the staff that you might serve on your campus, here's a QR code to learn all about our programs that we offer. And I thought the other thing, just a special announcement, I didn't wear mine today because it was in the wash, but these lovely friends of ours are modeling some LeaderShape merchandise. So if you resonate with some of the things that might be on their shirts or the sentiments that we share, you can visit this website on Square to get some of your own LeaderShape gear. And then the final thing that I have to share is that if you are interested in continuing the conversation and conversations about leadership education, we are partnering with the National Clearinghouse for Leadership Programs to host the Leadership Educator Symposium in December at the University of Tampa. And we are going to be deep diving into liberatory learning and exploring how we can co-create liberatory spaces within leadership education. And we would love for you all to join us. The site is there, but if you have questions, feel free to reach out. So with that, that's all I have for us this afternoon. Thank you again, Kyle. We'll hang on here for just a minute if anyone has any questions, but have a great afternoon.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.